nowhere. By Ayya, Khema, 1923–1997. Meditations on the Buddhist Path. Chapter 3. Calm and Insight. There are many different meditation techniques. In the Path of Purification, 40 of them are mentioned, but there are only 2 streams, 2 directions, and these are the 2 directions one has to take: calm and insight. They work hand in hand. Unless we know the direction we're going, it's highly unlikely that we'll get to our destination. We have to know which way to go.
Both directions, calm and insight, need to be practiced in order to obtain the results that meditation can bring. Most people want calm. Everybody's looking for some peace, for that feeling of blissful contentment. If they can get a glimpse of it in meditation, they're quite happy and try to get more of it. With a fair bit of it, many would be contented and satisfied with that alone. But that's not what meditation is designed to do. It's a means to an end. Calm is the means. Insight is the end. The means are essential and necessary, but they must never be confused with the end. And yet, because it's so entirely pleasant, a new attachment arises.
It is our constant difficulty that we want to keep what is pleasant and reject what is unpleasant. Because we make that our purpose in life, our life really has no purpose. It's impossible to get rid of everything unpleasant and to keep everything that's pleasant. As long as we have that as our direction, we have no direction. The same applies to meditation. So how are we going to obtain some calm, and what does it actually do for us? By keeping the attention on the breath, there will be some calm eventually. The mind may stop thinking for a moment and will really feel quite at ease. A mind that is thinking is never at ease because thinking is a process of movement, and movement has irritation in it. But there may come a moment of ease and we may be able to prolong that moment, and as we practice longer there is no reason why we can't do it. It's not that difficult. It may seem difficult in the beginning, but all that is needed is patience, determination, a bit of good karma, see Chapter 7, and a quiet place.
We must all have a bit of good karma, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. People who make a lot of bad karma don't usually come to a meditation retreat, and if they should come, they don't stay. So the good karma is already there. As to patience, we are more or less forced into that by remaining here. One thing you'll have to add to that, the one ingredient needed for this mixture, is determination. When you first sit down, make a resolution: I'm really going to stay on the breath now, and every time I slip off I'm going to come back. It's a balancing act, like walking on a tightrope. Each time you slip off you have to bring yourself back onto it. So determination is needed.
When that calm and pleasant feeling arises, the feeling the Buddha called a pleasant abiding, and then disappears again, which it must, because whatever has arisen will disappear, the first reaction that has to come to mind is knowing the impermanence, not, oh dear, it's gone again, or, that was nice. How am I going to get it back? Which is the usual way of reacting. Living according to Dhamma, experiencing according to Dhamma, is an unusual way. It's the other way around from what the crowd does. It's an individual understanding. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, before his enlightenment, Sujata brought him milk rice in a golden bowl and said he could also have the golden bowl. The Buddha threw the bowl into the river behind him and said that if it swam upstream against the current, he'd become enlightened. And of course it did. Can a golden bowl swim upstream? What this story means is that when we live according to Dhamma, we have to go against the current of our natural instincts and inclinations. We have to go against what is easy, comfortable, and done by everyone. It's much more difficult to go against the stream than to go with the current.
The pleasant abiding, the pleasant feeling, which is first physical then also emotional, first it's pleasure in the body, then it's pleasure and happiness in the emotions, then it can become very, very peaceful. That, too, has to vanish again. We must see its impermanence, and only then are we using this pleasant abiding for a purpose. If we don't see the impermanence, we are using it only for our own comfort. What we are using for our own comfort is self-directed and not directed to losing self, which is the essence of the Buddha's teachings. The whole of the Buddha's teachings are directed toward losing self. He said, There is only one thing I teach and that is suffering and its end to reach, but that doesn't mean that suffering in the world is going to stop. It means that if there's nobody here to react to suffering, there is no suffering. Self will stop. If there's nobody here to have a problem, how can there be a problem? Having pleasant abiding for one's own comfort, one goes in the wrong direction.
Going back to the breath again and again will lead us toward the attainment of calm. The eighth step on the Noble Eightfold Path, right concentration, means meditative absorption. Trying to stay on the breath will lead us in that direction, but nobody goes into the meditative absorptions by wishing to do so or by just sitting down in meditation once or twice. It takes time. So all that arises while trying to stay on the breath needs to be used for insight. Any thought that arises is not a bothersome intruder, nor an indication that one isn't suitable for meditation, nor that it's too hot, or too cold, or too uncomfortable, or too late, or too early, none of that. Thought is not an intruder trying to bother us. It's a teacher to teach us. In the final analysis, we are all our own teachers and our own pupils, and that is as it should be. But we need to know what to look at in order to be taught by it.
Each thought is a teacher. First of all, it teaches us about the unruliness of our mind, that our mind is not reliable and dependable. It thinks thoughts we don't even want to think, when we would much rather be totally calm and collected. The first thing we can learn about our mind is that it isn't such a wonderful part of us as we might have imagined just because we have learned, can remember, and can understand certain facts and concepts. It is an unruly, unreliable mind, not doing what we want it to do. The second thing to understand is that we don't have to believe our mind. We don't have to believe all these thoughts that come up. They have come without our invitation, and they'll go away again by themselves. They have little purpose, especially during meditation. Some of them might be 20 years old. Some of them might be pure fantasy. Some might be rather unpleasant, and some might be dreams. Some might be like the wisps that won't even appear properly. They all come so quickly that there's hardly time to label them. So why believe all the stuff that one usually thinks?
In meditation, we have the opportunity to get to know the mind, the thinking that's going on, and learn not to get involved in it. Likewise, why should we believe and get involved in all that thinking that occurs in everyday life? We believe it when our mind says, "This man is awful," or "This woman is a liar." We believe it when our mind says, "I'm so frustrated. I'm so bored," or "I have to get that thing," or "I have to go to that place." We believe it all. But why should we? It's exactly the same process in meditation. Thoughts arise, stay a moment, and cease again with no rhyme or reason. The first time we can really grasp this, we'll actually be able to change a thought that's in the mind to one that we would like to have. That's what can be done when we don't believe what the mind says any longer, but just observe its thought processes. It's the same with this air around us. We don't grab hold of it and say it's ours, and yet if it wasn't there we couldn't live. It's just there. Thoughts are like that. The thinking process is natural to the mind, and because we are alive, the thinking process goes on, but it's neither reliable nor believable. On the contrary, most of the thoughts the mind produces would be much better dropped.
There is something else we can learn about our mind. When we sit in meditation and the concentration doesn't happen but the thinking does, when we feel drowsy, or there is lack of attention, then we can learn this about ourselves, that without having some entertainment in the mind, we go to sleep. The mind wants to be entertained. It wants to read a book, watch television, visit the neighbors, do some work, anything to be occupied and entertained. It cannot be happy and contented just on its own. This is an interesting new bit of understanding about oneself. Imagine being in an empty room by yourself for a week, just you. People consider this dreadful punishment, and it is, because the mind can't handle it. It wants to be fed all the time. Just as the body wants to be fed, the mind does too. It needs input because it's not content with itself. This is another important new revelation about ourselves that we get when we sit in meditation.
Thoughts are very impermanent. They arise and they go, they don't stay, just like the breath. If you pay good attention, you may be able to notice their arising. You certainly notice their vanishing, that is easy to see, the arising is a little more difficult. But you can't keep any of those thoughts, can you? They are gone, aren't they? All the thoughts that you have had during the past hour, all have disappeared, haven't they? Impermanence and non-ownership, you don't really want to own all these thoughts, do you? They're not really worth it, are they? There are hardly any that would be worthwhile, so why try to own them? Why try to think, this is me, why not see that they are just a natural arising and vanishing, that's all. Similarly, with this body, is it really me? It's a natural arising through conception and vanishing through death, a law of nature, a fact of nature, which our ego conceit does not allow us to grasp.
Ego conceit does not necessarily mean that we are conceited people. Ego conceit means that we are not enlightened. Conceit has been eliminated only in arahants. It means that we are seeing the world and ourselves from the standpoint of me, and when we do, the world is often threatening and so are other people because me is fragile and can be easily hurt and toppled. All our thoughts that arise in meditation will give us an insight into ourselves, into the impermanence of this phenomenon, of body and mind, into the non-ownership of it. If we really owned our thoughts, why wouldn't we own something that was worth having? Nobody likes to own rubbish. All of us try to make our possessions worthwhile. In meditation, the thoughts are found to be not worthwhile.
The third aspect we can learn from all that thinking is that this is dukkha. Dukkha doesn't only mean suffering, it also means unsatisfactoriness, which is a much wider term and embraces everything we experience, even the most pleasant things, which we experience as unsatisfactory because of their impermanence. The unsatisfactoriness of our thinking process becomes very, very clear during meditation, because we actually want to concentrate and yet here we are sitting and thinking. We gain insight into impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self through personal experience. Nobody knows these three unless they have seen them for themselves. They are very nice words, which most of you may be familiar with, but you need to realize them through direct inner knowledge. Although we experience